Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to another one of my interviews with me, William Wallace, my show, William Wallace for America. And with me today is State Senator Sharon Hewitt. Senator, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, not only is it a pleasure to have you, but it's a pleasure if you give you an opportunity to talk about some of your legislation. I've been keeping an eye on what you've been doing. I'm really happy with what you're doing for the state. And I think when people watch this interview, I think they'll be happy with it also. So we'll get right to the bills because I know we got a whole bunch to cover. You've got House Bill 50. It provides for public school choice in certain high school programs.
Yeah, Senate Bill 50.
Senate Bill 50.
So I have 4 education bills, and this is one of them. I want as a mom and as a grandmother now, my first grandchild was born a couple of years ago, thank you, is to provide opportunities for our children and grandchildren to raise their families here in Louisiana and to be successful. And so, I've also evolved as a parent to one who doesn't believe that everybody needs to go to college to do that. And so what's great about Senate Bill 50 is it provides high school, full 4-year high school curriculums for students with 38 different pathways that they could take and not only graduate from high school, but end up with like an industry-based certification or a credential or an associate's degree where they can go to work right out of high school. And it's many of these high-paid jobs, that we need and we have opportunities for in Louisiana, whether it's computer stuff or nursing or coastal restoration. It's lots of variety, and I think it's going to be a great thing to engage all of our students and help put people back to work.
I love this, and one of the reasons I like it is because I've noticed in the legislature there's a lot of other bills that are really focusing on not only the jobs, like regular, basic paying, high paying jobs that you don't have to go to college for, but also there's a lot of less licensing, to be able to help promote just regular jobs that people don't need to go to college for. And I'm saying it that way because I know there's a whole bunch of them, electricians, plumbers, that kind of thing. There's a long list of them. We don't have time to cover that now, but I love the sentiment. I really appreciate that. Senate Bill 73 provides for appointments to fill vacancies in local offices under certain circumstances.
So we learned, this is from brought on behalf of the St. Tammany Parish School Board. We had kind of a quirky thing happen this year in that we had a school board member resign. They were a replacement was appointed. State law requires that come November you would elect a permanent person to fill out the remainder of the term. Well, the remainder of the term is only 6 weeks. And also in November, we would be electing new school board members, all of them, for the next 4 years. Those would be done under the new maps that we just redrew because of the new census data. The earlier person would be elected under the old maps because it's finishing out a term, and we thought that would be very confusing. And so this bill is basically taking care of that thing that happens once every 20 years if someone were to resign early. And it's just to kind of allow that appointed person to serve out the remainder of the term without being elected. So it's just a local bill, but something that, of course, is very important to my constituents in St. Tammany.
I love these local bills like this. A lot of people don't realize how it takes legislation to do some of this little cleanup work and tighten up some loose ends. But I'm glad to see you have your eyes on that in your district. House Bill, that was House Bill 74, I do believe. House Bill 73. I'm sorry, I keep saying House Bill. I'm sorry, Senate Bill. Senate Bill 74 provides relative to the qualification of poll watchers.
We learned through testimony on one of my other bills last year that state law apparently many years ago precluded those who are disabled from being able to work as a poll watcher. Mm-hmm. And so this bill is simply taking care of that. Perhaps there was some logical reason back in the day. There certainly isn't a reason today that any of us would not be able to accommodate the needs of a disabled person that wants to be a poll watcher.
This really expands rights for people, and that's something that I think is really important to people like that. SB 96 provides relative to the Community and Family Support System Fund.
This is a bill, again, for our disabled community that will better fine-tune the revenue streams that are coming in with the needs of the disabled community. And so whether you're getting waivers or providing other disability services, this is kind of another cleanup bill, but it was very important to our disabled citizens.
Right. I'm glad that you have your eye on that because, like you said, back when some of this was created, they didn't have their eyes on the disabled community as much as now the needs are expanding. Senate Bill 98 provides relative to the Louisiana Commission for the Deaf. Seems like another one.
I serve on the Louisiana Commission for the Deaf, and they have needs as well. One of the things that we've been working on is more technology in the Capitol, so that they can participate more fully in the legislative debates during session. They can watch things online and see the words at the bottom of the screen instead of, because they're not able to hear. There's a lot of things that we can do to make things much more accessible for the deaf community. This bill is helping to address, again, a lot of cleanup language and statute that needed to be done. It will also allow a person from the deaf community to participate on the board, even though they still receive services, which was prohibited by the Ethics Commission. So this, again, is making sure that all of our citizens are treated fairly and equitably, and that we provide the services that they need.
I love how you have your fingers on the pulse for everybody in this process, because this shows that not only are you concerned about your district, you're concerned about everybody in your district, even though it might be a small minority part of your district. It shows how much you want the involvement of everybody and reaching out to them like this. I appreciate that. Senate Bill 190 establishes the Computer Science Education Act.
Yes, and maybe I'll talk about Senate Bill 190 and Senate Bill 191 together. Yep. I love technology and recognize that so many of our industries and our jobs are dependent on technology now. And you see that our children, our grandchildren, our students are running circles around the rest of us in the area of technology. And we did a study a few years ago and trying to identify our workforce gaps in Louisiana, and determined that we needed to triple the number of computer coding skilled people in the next 5 years just to meet the current demand. Triple in 5 years. Well, that doesn't happen on its own, right? That only happens when you do something strategically to incentivize and create that momentum. And so Senate Bill 191 basically says our high school students can take computer coding in place of a foreign language and still meet the graduation and the TOPS requirements. Families love this bill. They love the idea because computer coding to many of us is like a foreign language.
Exactly.
And it's so much more applicable for many students. For those that want to take foreign language, that will still be available. But there is a tremendous pent-up demand, I will say, for computer coding. Our students love that. And then just to say, basically, we need to build the whole pipeline for more computer science and more technology in our schools. I have Senate Bill 190, which is the Computer Science Education Act. And it basically is going to create a task force to look at K through 12, what are the computer science skills that our students need to learn at every grade level, so that we're building this pipeline of students that are ready to go into more technology jobs. These are high wage, high demand jobs. We need them in Louisiana. It's a way to keep all of our students here working in Louisiana.
I love, this is the second bill we've talked about today that you've done that actually focuses on pieces of that make up the whole puzzle. And a lot of people don't realize that, we always talk about bringing more jobs to Louisiana or bringing more business and industry to Louisiana, but the only way to entice businesses and industries to come to Louisiana is with having a skilled labor force. And some of your legislation is really focusing on that on building that skilled labor force, and this is just another one.
Well, I'm a big Stephen Covey fan, and one of those, 7 principles of highly effective leaders is beginning with the end in mind. And so I like looking at the jobs that we have in Louisiana, those jobs that we would like to create, those industries we'd like to bring, and then working backwards. What do we need to do in our education system to build the capacity so that our kids graduate and have jobs here in our state? And instead of just going to college for the sake of learning, which I don't mean to diminish that.
Right.
But what we really all want is for our kids to be able to support their families, right, and to be self-sufficient. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
And I like what you're saying there. I mean, everybody talks about tops. Go be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and then they focus on that sometimes, I think, too much. And everybody gravitates towards that. And then a lot of the kids that weren't cut out to do that, whether it's their interest or their skills, they end up in the jobs that you're working on right now. They end up going and doing a technical job, that's equally important to our society. And what you're doing, like you said, working ahead of the game, is you're looking forward and saying, hey, let's build the bridges now to make it easier for students to get to those jobs, in a quicker way, in a more effective way. I like that. House Bill 193 provides for the reapportionment plans of school boards.
Yes, Senate Bill 193.
I spent a lot of time on the House side.
We're in the upper chamber over here. We're in the upper chamber. There are some very specific state laws around redistricting school boards. So as most of your listeners probably know, we got the 2020 census data in the last year, and the census basically requires all of these entities that represent people to represent equal numbers of people. And so whether you're talking about that on the congressional level or the state legislative level or the parish council level or the school board level, everyone is redrawing districts to balance their populations. School boards are prohibited by state law from splitting up precincts. And they can split up only so many precincts in a school board district. And what we found is that there were a number of school boards that were kind of ignoring that state law. And so what this bill does, Senate Bill 193, is it says to the Secretary of State, if anyone does do that, then you shall basically make their plan null and void and not allow them to conduct elections, under those maps. So we just basically want everyone to follow state law.
Put some teeth into the state law.
Putting a little teeth into it so that people aren't just blowing it off, and you're not required to file a lawsuit to stop that from happening. The Secretary of State can stop it just because you broke the state law.
I got that. All right, House Bill 194 provides relative to the membership of the Louisiana Health Works Commission.
This bill really is just giving the Louisiana State Nurses Association an opportunity to appoint someone to this healthcare commission. They have been asking to be more involved in many of our boards and commissions, the nurses have, and this was a great opportunity to do that.
Giving another part of our society a say in the process.
195
provides relative to safe harbor protection for nurses.
Yeah, this bill, again, is a bill on behalf of nurses. We're actually working with the Hospital Association on this bill tomorrow. Sometimes you file a bill that still needs work after you file it, and this is probably one of those. The idea of safe harbor is for a nurse to be able to say, particularly we saw this during COVID, where nurses were put in roles and in positions because we had such staffing shortages and such great demand in our hospitals. Sometimes nurses were put in a position for which they weren't fully trained or totally comfortable. And so safe harbor is a process where you say, time out, we need to sort of think about this so that we're always keeping patient safety as a top priority. And perhaps there's some additional training that I as a nurse need to get, or there's another nurse that can fill that role and I can backfill for that nurse. I mean, there's a kind of a process. The Hospital Association believes that they already do have many of those processes in place, and that perhaps we don't need this legislation. And so, one of the things that we do that people don't see behind the scenes is we work really with all the parties involved to help make sure that we address all of those issues in the legislation that we propose as much in advance as possible. And so we'll be hopefully improving this bill or deciding perhaps that it's not even needed.
And what's interesting, I want to point out, at the Capitol, you see a lot of the representatives of a lot of these groups that you're mentioning come to you all, and I watch how intently you all listen to these people that are trying to help you all work with legislation that ultimately helps the people of Louisiana. And I like that too. 203, Senate Bill 203 creates an education savings account for certain students reading below grade level. I found that one very interesting.
Yeah, this bill is probably being talked about as much, if not more, than any of my other bills. And last year I passed a bill focused on literacy, and it was because we had done a study recently, just prior to that in Louisiana, that said that 60% of our third graders were not reading on grade level. And so if you're not reading on grade level by the third grade, you're not ready to learn in the fourth grade or the fifth grade, right? And those children are set up, in my opinion, for challenges for the rest of their school career. You need to be building reading skills in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and it was shocking to me. So last year I passed a bill that established an accountability system for K through 2, and put in place interventions, testing protocols, a role for parents, some funding, so that we could really emphasize and draw a line in the sand and say, we want every Louisiana child reading before they leave the third grade.
Right.
What this bill does this year is it takes it a step further, and it says, if your second grade or third grade child is not reading on grade level, we're going to allow you to take the state funding that we have set aside for every child. It's about $5,500 a year, and allow that parent to move their child to a private school or a home-based school environment where they can find a better venue for their child to learn to read.
I like that.
So $5,500 of taxpayer dollars would be set aside in what we're calling an education savings account. So it's kind of like a savings account, right, where the money follows the child, just the state funding portion, so that you can move your child into an environment where they can be taught to read.
I love this, giving parents more of a choice.
Parents will have choice, and every child learns differently.
Exactly.
So in some cases, the child could be in a phenomenal school, but perhaps there's too many children in a class, they need more one-on-one attention, they have some kind of learning deficiency of some sort, and so there's lots of different ways children learn, and this just gives parents more choice.
And the side benefit to this bill could be that it opens up more open-minded thinking later for not only parents but for school administrators to see that every child learns different, and they can see how children are in different environments, and it could be really a true test for open doors in the future for our education system. Senate Bill 224 provides for remote operations of the legislature during a gubernatorial declared state of emergency.
So one thing we learned, during COVID, of course, is that we all learned how to Zoom.
Right.
Right. Everyone learned how to Zoom. And so everyone basically except the legislature. We were not able to meet in any kind of legislative committee hearing or anything by Zoom. State law and the Constitution requires us to meet in person at the Capitol. And so what this bill does, and the companion bill is Senate Bill 225, which is the constitutional amendment, would basically, under times of a gubernatorial declared emergency, and at the call of the presiding officer, which would be the Senate and the House, Speaker and the President, we would be able to meet remotely under, again, very, very narrow circumstances, and follow all the protocols that all the other agencies have been developing over the last couple of years.
Right.
So we think this will also provide more opportunity for public participation, because people can participate remotely, which sometimes is easier for people than those traveling to the Capitol. But again, it would be under very narrow circumstances. We still see great value, and our priority will always be meeting in the Capitol, will be our first choice. But there could be extreme emergencies where having this in state law and in our Constitution would be very valuable.
I like your focus on keeping the state, the law to be able to meet in person, and making it narrow to where this only opens the door for certain situations. But I think it's important to point out that it helps that if the state needs to meet on a last second basis for something in an emergency or something quick, it gives you the opportunity to react for the people of Louisiana.
That's right.
I like that. We've got House Bill 225 was a constitutional amendment for that. 258 provides relative to voting and the holding of elections impaired as the result of a declared emergency or disaster.
So the committee that I chair, the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, oversees all of the election laws. And your listeners might remember during COVID we had a number of elections, and the Secretary of State said, because of COVID, we are not able to conduct our our elections the way we normally would.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, by law, is required in those situations to set up an emergency election plan. In some cases, we did things like we added extra days of early voting. We changed mail balloting somewhat for senior citizens because they were locked down in the nursing homes. And we did a few different things. The process by which, in current law, you have to go through that is pretty cumbersome. The Secretary has to present his plan to the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee and separately the House Governmental Affairs Committee. And then we have to all agree. Then the full legislature has to vote, and then the governor has to agree. And it was a very sequential process, which there were a number of times when we didn't all agree.
Right.
And the secretary had to go back to square one and start over. What my bill does is it provides a more streamlined way for us to do that. The committees would meet jointly, first of all. The governor would be allowed to send a representative to that meeting where the secretary presented a plan or plans that basically we could negotiate in a public hearing all at one time with all the players at the table, and then send it to the governor for his approval. Should he not approve it, my bill also provides an opportunity for the legislature with a 2/3 vote to override his decision. That did not exist currently in state law. And so we think this is going to be a better process. It'll be more streamlined, and it also gives the legislature, kind of the final say.
I like the well thought out plan to protect our elections in the future. Appreciate that. House Bill 259 provides reporting requirements for certain state agencies that administer certain federal and state social service or financial assistance programs.
Well, thank you. We did an audit of the TANF program. It's the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families this past year through legislation that I passed last year. And we learned so much through that audit about how our money was being spent or not spent, where there were work requirements, were people working, what percentage of our people were working. We found that Louisiana was among the lowest at 3.5%.
Right.
So this bill casting a little bit wider net and saying, let's look at a number of different programs in different agencies and do the same thing. Do kind of an audit of how those are performing, eligibility requirements, work requirements, is the federal funding being spent as it's supposed to be, so that we can find opportunities that we can work on those and improve upon them, so that we're doing what we all want, and that's to get the federal dollars to the people that need them the most.
Right.
And those that don't need them or aren't qualified, we're going to find ways to help give them the support they need to go to work.
I love this. House Bill 260 provides relative to Community and Family Support System Fund. Is that tied to 259 by some chance?
No, it is not. It is...
provides relative to Community and Family Support System Fund.
We kind of talked
Senate
about
Bill 260.
that. Well, we talked about that with Senate Bill 96. What I'm realizing now, Senate Bill 96 we withdrew from the files of the Senate. It is now Senate Bill 260.
Okay.
And talking about that, was talking about the disabled community and the waiver program and
nice.
disability
Okay.
services.
Yeah, I follow it. And that's what I like getting out of these videos. It helps people follow the system. 288, Senate Bill 288, constitutional amendment to increase the composition of the Louisiana Supreme Court from 6 to 8 justice associates.
I have several Supreme Court bills filed. The Supreme Court, by law, does not have to be redistricted when you get the new census data like we do everybody else. So this past special session, we drew new maps for the congressional districts, for the State House, the State Senate, the Public Service Commission, and the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. The Supreme Court, by law, does not honor what we call the one man, one vote principle. So they do not have to be balanced based on population. The argument is that, they're there, the Supreme Court justices, to interpret the law, not necessarily to represent people.
Right.
And so they don't have to represent the same number of people. However, what we have learned through the process is that most of our constituents really don't see it that way. They do think that they should be balanced based on population. And so we have had a bill in the past. Last year we had a bill to expand the Supreme Court from 7 members, or 6 plus the Chief Justice, to 9, or 8 plus the Supreme Court Justice, so that it would give us an opportunity to include another majority-minority district.
Yeah.
That bill in the past failed last year. I have filed that bill as an opportunity for us to consider that again. So basically have kind of 3 Supreme Court bills. One would be a constitutional amendment to be able to expand the court from 7 to 9.
That's this one, right?
One would provide the map for a 7-member court, and one would provide a map for a 9-member court.
Those that you're referencing, Senate Bill 308 and 309 on those too.
That's correct.
Good. I'm glad we knocked those out real well. But what I think is important to note when you talk about population, I think this bill proves that you're trying to give more people a voice in our system. I think that's what this bill does. It really proves that you're working hard to give everybody a voice.
Thank you.
I like that. Senate Bill 292, Environmental Quality, provides for regulation of greenhouse emissions.
Well, we all want to do a better job of protecting our environment. I have filed a number of bills over the last few years to do that. Carbon sequestration has been one that I've championed, and that's basically taking carbon out of the air, or preventing it from being emitted in the air, condensing it into a liquid and injecting it underground in a geologic formation for storage forever. There has been a lot of work done, of course, on the federal level. The governor's had his climate change task force put together some recommendations on how we can have cleaner air in the state of Louisiana. What this bill says is that we want the legislature basically to authorize any of the activity in that area. We don't want this to be done through executive order or through rulemaking in the state agencies. We think this is policy making, and we want the legislature to be the ones authorizing this, because you have to look at the whole picture. It's not just about managing your business based on carbon, right? You also have to look at cash flow, return on investment, and you want to make sure that we're not putting Louisiana in a position of being so over-regulated that we're non-competitive, and that we're either losing businesses or they're not coming to our state and going to other states because their standards are different. And so it's a balancing act. And we just want a seat at the table as the policymakers, and that's what this bill does.
I love the common sense approach to protect our oil and gas industry while also protecting our environment and coupling it in a way that lets everybody know that we care about both. That's a good approach. SB 333 provides relative to boards and commissions.
This is a cleanup bill. Again, the committee that I chair, Senate Governmental Affairs, we have oversight over boards and commissions. There are literally thousands of them. And over time, some of them sort of outlive their usefulness. And so I generally will have a bill every year to look at those boards or commissions that have not been meeting, don't have a function, and we eliminate them.
I like the update. That's good stuff. SB 388. That was a quick way to say that I like how you're phasing out old boards that aren't needed anymore. SB 388 prohibits the sale of certain abortion-inducing drugs without a prescription and creates the crime of criminal-induced chemical abortion.
Well, this is probably one of the most important bills that I'll carry this year. President Biden, in December, we learned, basically eliminated the requirement that mothers have to see a physician before they can get chemical pills to induce an abortion. And what this bill does is it makes that basically a criminal offense to sell or distribute these mail-order abortion pills to mothers without having a prescription from a Louisiana licensed physician. You don't want mothers sort of on their own with mail-order pills without being under the care of a physician. They need pregnancy tests and ultrasounds and you want follow-up with the doctor, and you want to make sure that the mother's health is not at risk. And so that's what this bill does, is it says basically that that's a criminal offense with time in jail and fines for those that are selling or distributing mail order abortion pills without a doctor's prescription.
And what I like about this is I think it helps stop the unintended, this is the right way to say it, unintended consequences of someone with nefarious purposes. This might help other people that might have been a victim of someone with nefarious purposes.
Well, people, the bad guys are always going to find ways to work around the system. And I'm not trying to say that people, that are providing these pills are necessarily bad guys, but...
Oh, no, they're not saying them. I'm saying that somebody else that might have want harm on somebody else. This could help protect somebody from somebody that wants to do harm that's not in the medical profession.
Yeah, we need to always try to consider the health of the mother.
I like that.
In these actions, and I think everyone deserves and needs to be under the advice of a medical professional.
Like that. SCR 12, request halt in actions that cancel or delay offshore oil and natural gas lease sales.
Well, this is basically a nod to our oil and gas industry, and an SCR is a resolution. It's
Correct.
not state law, but it basically will say this: in the state of Louisiana, our legislature supports the oil and gas industry, and we recognize what tremendous harm President Biden is doing to the entire world economy by not having the lease sales offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. Having worked in the oil and gas industry for such a long time, I understand that the pipeline or the timeline that has to be built. Do you know, William, when we're leases offshore in the deep water, in most cases, those oil and gas companies are committing to a 5-year or a 10-year plan when we don't even have the technology yet to develop that lease.
Wow.
Because it's in such deep water, or the temperatures are so high, or the pressures are so high in that environment, the technology and the equipment don't even exist. So they're having to develop the equipment and the technology and then to be able to drill a well and have a discovery within, let's say, the 5-year lease.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens when the president is throwing so much uncertainty about whether he'll even have a lease sale over the next 5 years, companies are hesitating. They're not willing to invest because once you drill a discovery well, then there are follow-up wells. You have to build a big platform with the facilities
Right.
and the pipelines and everything to get it all hooked up. Those are billions and billions and billions of dollars of investment and a significant amount of time. It takes probably 5 years from when you first drill the first well to when you're able to produce a
Mm-hmm.
well. And so, what he's injecting into our economy is so much doubt about the future of oil and gas in this state. And it's you can see what it's doing right now to
Right.
our economy. Gasoline prices are sky high. There was an article today about fertilizers being so expensive. Those come from fossil fuels,
Right.
As do the clothing, the polyesters, the plastics, everything, that's part of our lifestyle.
Right.
Comes from fossil fuels. And so, we have bills in the legislature dealing with solar and wind, and I support those, and those are all
Right.
again, we have to have all of the above energy strategy, but not at the expense of our oil and gas industry. And so that's what this SCR
This just
is
says, hey,
doing.
oil and gas industry, we're going to protect you down here. And I'm glad you brought renewable energy because now, I'm a fan of renewable energy. I'm a fan of oil and gas, but I love the fact that oil and gas companies invest a lot of money in renewable energy. And I think if we protect our oil and gas companies here in Louisiana, we're also protecting renewable energy for those that want that too. We got one more on the record and 2 more quick questions for you after that. SR4 designates March 23rd, 2022 as NASA Day at the state capitol.
Well, the Michoud Assembly Facility is in my district in New Orleans East, and it is so phenomenal what is happening there. From the interstate, all you see is this big, square, tall building with the NASA logo on the side, and most people have no idea what's happening there. But we are building the Space Launch System, the SLS system, that is 212 feet tall, 27 feet wide, and this is basically the rocket that carries the oxygen and the hydrogen that's mixed together to basically ignite the four engines to take the first woman and the next man to the moon. It will launch in the summer. This summer, it's already down at Kennedy Space
Oh, really?
Center.
That's this summer?
Yes, it is
Back
this
to the
summer.
moon.
Back to the moon, and that is really in preparation for an ongoing mission to Mars. So I think the idea is, moon will be sort of a stopping point,
Right.
and then we'll go from the moon to Mars, and so it's just tremendous. And so we wanted to recognize all the NASA employees and the work being done at Michoud, and we did that earlier in March, as we do every year. They're a tremendous employer, certainly in my district and in the state of Louisiana.
And I think it's great for our country. It's all right here, local in your district. What a great resolution that is. The two other quick questions. One, update us on the congressional maps on what that was just the veto override in the House and the Senate this last week. Would you like to update us on that?
Yeah, it's been a busy few months. Again, the committee that I chair was responsible for redistricting and drawing all of the maps, the most controversial of which ended up being the congressional map. The governor did veto that map, and the legislature met this past week and voted to override the governor's veto of that. So that map is now going to become law. And not to say that it won't be litigated, and many lawsuits have already been filed to litigate that. And the basis for the litigation is that the other side believes that the maps don't meet the Voting Rights Act. What the Voting Rights Act of 1965 says is if your minority population is of a sufficient size and is geographically compact, then you have to draw a minority district to allow those voters to elect a candidate of their choice. And when we looked at the numbers and the data, it does matter where people live.
Right.
They have to live close enough together where you could actually draw a second minority district. We already have one of the 6 as a minority district. The other challenge we have is the other federal law, the 14th Amendment, that says you shall not use race as a predominant reason for drawing a district. And so, that was kind of the lane that we were having to navigate through in between these two federal laws and drawing our maps. And so when we looked at the data in the legislature, we believed that you could not draw a second minority district that would perform without hurting the other congressional district, CD2. You would end up with basically 2 districts that looked like they were minority districts on paper, but really didn't perform as minority districts. And so we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure that we had a minority district that did perform as a minority district, and therefore the maps that we passed only had one of the 6 as a majority minority district. So the ball is in the court of the hands of the court system now, and so we'll be monitoring that and see how that progresses. But at least we know we have a map. We were able to override the governor's veto, which is the first time in 31 years that that's happened in the Louisiana legislature. So it was very
exciting.
historic.
Yeah, I say exciting. You just need to see it because it shows the balance of power. But the way I understand it is, if you created a second district, like you said, it'd be so spread out. People, the people in those districts don't have the power that they have when it's consolidated all in one district. And being a consolidated one district, they have a lot more power and say that way than they would if it was all spread out, around.
Well, there were lots of interesting maps that were offered up. We heard, dozens and dozens of them. The public submitted lots of maps this year. Of course, there's an app for everything. So there were web-based programs that had the census data where any citizen could basically draw a map. And we had a ton of public input on that. And some of them were very creative in how they, connected up majority black precincts to be able to draw a district. Many of those don't really pass the eyeball test or the ocular test.
I understand,
yeah. They don't look very compact, and it does kind of look like you worked really hard to collect up black voting precincts, because again, it does matter where people live.
But a second district would just take away power from people,
Well, you certainly don't want to take a voter out of a minority district that's performing as a minority district where they can elect a candidate of their choice and move them into a different district that's not performing as a minority district. I mean, that's you're hurting those voters by doing that.
I like the forethought in that. One last question for you. There's an election commission, I think, that you're a member of. Would you like to give people an update on that commission?
Yeah, that's the Voting System Commission.
Commission.
That we created in state law last year. That was the bill that I passed.
I say election because that's how people understand it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's called the Voting Commission.
It is about selecting a voting system. In state law, in the bill that I passed last year, we are moving from our old, almost defunct clunker voting machines to a paper-based system. There are still many different ways you can have a paper-based system. And so this Voting System Commission was put together with a diverse group of people, some legislators, election experts.
I know, I've seen the board.
A lady representing the disabled community, a clerk of court, registrar of voters, so that all the voices could be heard and we could evaluate what other states are doing and look at best practices and determine what's the best voting system for Louisiana. The commission has done a tremendous amount of work. I think our next step is to actually have manufacturers of equipment to come in with their paper ballots and set up in the rotunda so we can all look at the equipment and play with it. And then we'll meet again as a commission and make some recommendations to the secretary. And we'll make that a very public process so that people will know that have an interest in coming to the Capitol and seeing some of the options that we're considering.
I like the paper ballot option. And I want to point out that when we say paper ballots, to let people know, that's not meaning that it's going to be all paper ballot. You'll get your results quickly because there's still some sort of electronics involved in getting the quick results. But the paper ballot allows a little bit more of a feeling of security for those that are concerned about it, but also auditing, I think it is, will be a part of that.
That's the primary reason we did this. I mean, the first was the big machines that we have are 30 years old and you can't get replacement parts for them anymore. So change had to happen. What 38 other states are doing is a paper-based system that basically you'll have a paper ballot. It might be marked by hand. It could be marked by a machine. You'll get to look at it and then put it in a scanner that will actually tally the votes electronically. And the paper drops into a locked box that is there forever so that you can audit the results between the machine and the paper. So if there's an audit or a recount, you will have a paper-based system that you can go back and count all of those votes by hand if there's a need to do so. But for most elections, we'll take the reading from the scanners, tally those all up statewide or throughout the district, and we'll get results that night. And so I think it's going to be a really good system. It'll have the checks and balances in it that we all want, and still provide, I think, accurate results on the election night.
Most people won't even know the difference, but I appreciate the confidence that you're going to add back into our election system through this process.
Well, voters' confidence around the country was shaken in the last election cycle. And whether, there was any truth to it or not any truth to it, people all have different beliefs about what happened or didn't happen in other states. All I can do is to try to make the elections in Louisiana the very best they can be, and to put enough checks and balances in the system where we have confidence, as you say, to know that the elections that people that are supposed to vote can vote. My hope is that everyone will vote, and that we will have accurate elections and be confident in the results.
Accurate, accessible, and audible.
Yes.
I love it. Senator Hewitt, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know that you've got to get back on the floor here pretty soon, but I want to thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate all the hard work you're doing for Louisiana. Is there any last words you'd like to say?
Well, come and see us at the Capitol. I'll say that. This is our first session since the COVID public health emergency, where things have been pretty much back to normal. So, we have lots of school groups and church groups here visiting. We'd love to see you. And to those of you back home in District 1, I appreciate you and I appreciate your input and your help and your prayers.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please share not only the interview, but check out the podcast on all podcast apps at William Wallace for America. Thank you so much. Have a great day. God bless America, but God bless the great state of Louisiana.
Thank you so much. And you can also check it out if you want to see some more info on what I'm covering and what I'm doing at SharonHewitt.com.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.